Welcome back. How long have you been watching my channel? Let me know below.
They skipped my birthday. Again, not a call, not a card, not even one of those lazy, sorry we missed it texts that people send out of obligation when they realize 3 days too late that they forgot someone's entire existence. And it's not like I'm some distant cousin or a second-tier friend from high school. I'm their daughter, their firstborn, 34 years old last Tuesday, and they didn't so much as blink in my direction. Meanwhile, I sat on my couch in Ohio, eating leftover Chinese takeout and scrolling through Instagram, where I watched, live with music and filters, my parents clapping and laughing at a full-blown dog birthday party in California. My sister's golden retriever, Bear, turned 2. There were balloons shaped like bones, a cake made of peanut butter and bacon, and party hats on every human and dog in the backyard. My mom wore a shirt that said Dog Grandma. My dad held Bear up like Simba from The Lion King while everyone sang. And all I could think was, they didn't even remember I exist. I didn't cry. Not then. Crying had become a muscle I hadn't flexed in a long time, not because I wasn't hurt, but because somewhere along the way I learned that expressing it only made it worse. Growing up in my house was like being stuck in a room full of mirrors that only showed one reflection, Amanda's. She was always the shiny one, the golden child in more ways than one. Everything about her sparkled in my parents' eyes. When she got a B, it was because the teacher was clearly unfair. When I got an A-, it was, why not an A? Amanda was prom queen, cheer captain, and later, the woman who made Dog Mom her whole identity and got thousands of followers for dressing Bear in tiny seasonal outfits. I was the reliable one, the one who moved out at 18, paid her own bills, and never caused problems. And for that, I was rewarded with silence. That night, sitting alone, I watched every one of their videos twice. There was Bear, licking frosting off a paw-sized cake, with Amanda beaming behind him. Dad had flown in 3 days earlier, Mom 2 days after that. They hadn't visited me in over a year, despite saying they really should get around to it. And just like that, something in me snapped. Not loud or explosive. It was quiet, like a light switch, a realization. I was done waiting for them to care. The family phone plan had been in my name since college. It started as a practical thing. I had better credit, and back then, my parents were struggling financially. I added them to my account to help. Then Amanda joined when she got her first job. They all just stayed. Over time, I paid the bills, dealt with the service issues, managed upgrades. They never thought twice about it, and neither did I until now. I opened the mobile app and stared at their names. Mom, Dad, Amanda. I didn't rage, I didn't second guess. I hit remove from plan, one by one. It was over in under 2 minutes. That was it. No announcement, no text to warn them, no explanation. Just silence. The same silence I'd lived with for years. The same silence they'd handed me on every birthday, every milestone, every time I needed them, and they chose someone or something else. The next morning, I woke up early out of habit and instinctively checked my phone. No notifications, no missed calls, nothing. I drank my coffee in silence and went to work like nothing had happened. But part of me was listening, waiting for the sound of the storm I knew was coming. By lunch, I had 3 Facebook messages, 1 from Amanda, 2 from Mom, all some version of, "Hey, is something up with the phones?" I ignored them. By dinner time, I had 6 emails, mostly confused and increasingly irritated. Amanda sent one with the subject line, WTF. My dad tried to be polite. "Sweetie, is there an issue with the family plan? I can't call anyone." Still, I said nothing. For the first time in my life, I had their full attention, and I wasn't even in the room. The silence stretched over into the next day. My coworkers noticed I was unusually chipper, which they assumed was due to the nice weather. I smiled and nodded, letting them believe whatever they wanted. I was in control of something for once, but underneath, a part of me felt like I was standing on the edge of a very tall building, 1 foot already over the railing. wondering how far the fall would go. By the evening of day 2, I started to see the cracks form. Amanda posted a long passive-aggressive Instagram story about how some people are just bitter and can't let others be happy. No names, of course, but she filmed it while sitting next to Bear in a new birthday hoodie. Mom sent me a final email that night. It said, "We need to talk. This isn't funny." She still didn't mention my birthday. That was when it really hit me, not just the birthday, or the phone plan, or Bear's ridiculous cake. What cut deepest was that, even in crisis, even when they needed me, they couldn't bring themselves to care enough to ask the right question. It wasn't, "Are you okay?" or "Did we hurt you?" It was, "Why aren't the phones working?" Like I was the IT department of their lives. Like my value only existed when I could provide a service. So I kept waiting. I had no plan, no master revenge plot. I just sat in the stillness and let it do the work for me. Sometimes silence is louder than shouting. And in my case, it was about to become deafening. Because on the morning of day 3, right as I was finishing a client report and sipping my second coffee, someone knocked on the glass front door of my office. I looked up and there she was, my mom. Her hair was frizzy from humidity, mascara streaked down her face, her expression somewhere between frantic and lost. She held a piece of paper in one hand. It was a printout of my company's address. She hadn't called. She couldn't. And now, standing there like a ghost from another life, she looked at me through the glass like she didn't even know who I was anymore. There's a certain power in silence, especially when it's deliberate and cold, the kind that follows years of being talked over, passed by, or forgotten entirely, like an old box in the attic no one ever bothers to open because they assume they already know what's inside. That morning, after I removed every single one of them from the phone plan, I felt that silence stretch around me like a weighted blanket, suffocating to some, but oddly comforting to me. I had spent so many years tiptoeing around their moods, their preferences, their excuses, that reclaiming even a sliver of control felt like an unexpected kind of freedom. Not loud, not triumphant, but something deeper, more satisfying, like a locked door clicking shut. At first, the consequences were small, almost laughably subtle. Amanda tried to call Mom, but her phone showed no service. Mom tried to call Dad, same result. Then they all tried me. Nothing, no connection. So they moved to email, the last frontier for people who still think tech malfunctions are accidental. Amanda's first message was brief and agitated. "Kara, I think something's wrong with my phone. Can you check?" I read it, let the screen go dark, and didn't respond. An hour later, Mom chimed in with one of those chirpy, performative messages that used to fool me back when I still craved her attention. "Hey, sweetheart, hope everything's okay. Could you look into the family plan? I think there's been a mix-up." No acknowledgement of the date, no mention of my birthday, not even a stray belated. The more they messaged, the more obvious it became. They still hadn't connected the dots. They thought it was an error, a glitch, a technical issue, and that made it even worse, honestly, because I realized right then that my absence didn't even register as an emotional event, just a problem to fix. I wasn't someone they missed or worried about. I was tech support, customer service, the daughter with the credit score, and the Verizon login. If that sounds bitter, maybe it is. But bitterness has a taste only those who've swallowed enough neglect can truly identify. And in that moment, it coded everything I felt. By the second day, the tone started to shift. Amanda's next email came with less confusion and more accusation. "Seriously, Kara? Did you cancel the plan? Why would you do that? Are you mad about something?" I stared at the screen, imagining her voice. That high, dismissive tone she always used when she knew she'd crossed a line, but didn't think it was a big enough one to matter. She was the queen of minimizing, the empress of emotional invalidation, and somehow she'd never lost the family's loyalty. I could have printed that email, framed it, titled it, "How to Pretend You Care Without Actually Saying Anything." Mom followed later that evening, and this time the chirp was gone. Her email was curt, sharp-edged, and deeply familiar. This isn't funny anymore. Whatever point you're trying to make, it's gone too far. We need our phones back on. Fix it. No apology, no curiosity, just a demand wrapped in guilt. As if I'd suddenly become the villain for no longer funding their convenience. And that's when something inside me truly clicked. This was not just about a phone plan. This was about the way they'd always expected me to carry the weight of everything while they floated above consequences. My silence wasn't just inconvenient. It was an interruption to the script they'd written for my life, and I had finally stopped reading my lines. The quiet between their emails became louder, more desperate. I imagined the chaos, Mom trying to book a return flight home and realizing she couldn't get her boarding pass. Amanda unable to log into her pet influencer account without two-step verification. Dad probably still trying to make a call the old-school way, wondering why nothing worked. The irony was delicious, but it wasn't about revenge for me. Not fully. It was about pulling the curtain back and forcing them to exist in the kind of uncertainty I lived in for years. Waiting, wondering, hoping someone would notice the silence. At work, I kept my composure, even as my inbox filled up with increasingly frantic messages. I didn't mention a thing to my coworkers, even though one of them commented on how relaxed I seemed, like I'd taken a vacation without leaving town. Maybe I had. A vacation from being invisible. And just as I was starting to enjoy the quiet, the illusion that I had finally taught them something, I got the one message that pierced the armor. It was from Mom again, but this time it wasn't an email. It was a comment on a years-old Facebook photo, one of me and Amanda as kids, sitting on the porch with matching scrapes on our knees and juice box smiles. Her comment was simple, just 6 words. "Kara, please, just talk to me." For a split second, I hesitated. 6 words, after decades of being invisible. Part of me wanted to give in, to call her, to hear her voice, and see if maybe, just maybe, there was something genuine buried under all the years of oversight and favoritism. But another part of me, the part that had sat alone on too many birthdays, felt nothing but exhaustion. I didn't owe her comfort. I didn't owe her the explanation she was too proud to ask for on day one. I owed myself the dignity of not folding just because the silence had become uncomfortable. That night, I slept deeper than I had in months, and as the hours ticked past, I realized that something was shifting, not in them, but in me. I was no longer the girl who waited for apologies that never came. I was no longer the daughter who kept forgiving, hoping one day they'd remember to care. I was done giving grace to people who never noticed it being given. And then came day 3. I was halfway through a morning spreadsheet when I heard the receptionist call my name, voice laced with confusion. "Kara, there's a woman here asking for you. Says she's your mom." My heart didn't skip a beat. It dropped like a stone. I stood slowly, walked to the lobby, and there she was. Mascara streaked, hair limp, blouse wrinkled from what looked like hours of travel. She held a crumpled printout of my office address, probably from an old email footer. And she was crying. She hadn't called. She couldn't. She had shown up in person, like a ghost from another version of my life, finally ripped from the past by a silence too loud to ignore. The human eye adjusts to light, just as the heart adjusts to disappointment. And as I stood there in the middle of the lobby, staring at my mother, makeup ruined, blouse damp with sweat, holding that pathetic printout like a surrender flag, I didn't feel rage or satisfaction or pity, not immediately at least. What I felt bizarrely was the jarring sensation of distance shrinking too quickly between two people who had let it grow too far for too long. She looked small, not physically, but spiritually, like the authority she once wielded over every corner of my childhood had crumbled in the shadow of this very public, very unglamorous breakdown. And the worst part was that she still didn't know why. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice cracked before she could get the first word out. And when I didn't move, didn't rush toward her, didn't offer comfort, didn't act like the daughter she remembered, something in her posture collapsed. The receptionist, bless her heart, asked if I needed a moment, and I nodded, motioning toward the side door that led to the alley behind our building. I didn't want to give my coworkers a front row seat to the unraveling of whatever relationship still existed between my mother and me. We stepped into the alley where the summer heat stuck to your skin like guilt. And still she said nothing, just stood there blinking like she was trying to focus through a fog she hadn't realized she created. Eventually I broke the silence, but not with kindness. I asked, "No phone? No ride? You walked here?" And she nodded, still breathless, as if confirming something mundane, like the weather. She said she had borrowed a stranger's phone at the airport to search my company online, had written the address down by hand, and had taken a shuttle to within a few blocks before walking the rest of the way under the midday sun. I didn't clap or applaud the effort. I didn't thank her for finally showing up. I just stared at her, wondering if this was her rock bottom, or if she was just passing through mine. She finally spoke, voice brittle and broken. "What happened to you, Kara? Why would you do this to us?" And in that question, I heard the root of everything. The assumption that my action was cruelty rather than consequence. The belief that my silence was an attack instead of a boundary. It was like watching someone break into your house and scream when they trip over the mess they made. I took a long breath before answering, making sure every word landed like the truth it carried. "You flew across the country for a dog's birthday party and didn't even remember your own daughters," I said, not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. Her face contorted, somewhere between embarrassment and defensiveness. And then, in the kind of whisper only shame knows how to use, she said, "We didn't mean to hurt you. It was just... we thought you were fine." Fine. The word felt like a knife. That was what I had become to them. Fine. Manageable. Unproblematic. The daughter who didn't demand much because she learned early that demanding didn't get her anything but disappointment. I asked her, "When was the last time you asked if I was fine? Or if I needed anything? Or if I wanted to celebrate my life the way you celebrate Amanda's dog?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Then came the twist. She reached into her bag and pulled out a letter, handwritten, smudged at the corners, like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. She said she had written it on the flight, after realizing there was no way to fix this with an email or a call. And she didn't even try to hand it to me, just held it up like proof she was trying. I didn't take it. Instead, I asked her something I never had before. "Why her, Mom? Why always her? Why does Amanda get all the praise, the attention, the affection, and I get whatever's left, if anything at all?" She froze, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw real panic in her eyes. Not confusion, not annoyance, real panic, like she had been caught in a lie she didn't even know she'd been telling for years. Her answer didn't come easily. She choked on it. She stumbled. And then, with tears streaming down her cheeks and her voice no louder than the buzzing of the overhead wires, she said, "You were the surprise, Kara. You weren't supposed to be born. Your father and I were... things were bad. You came at a time when we didn't know if we'd stay together. Amanda was the child we planned, the one we dreamed about. You were the one who made us stay, but it was hard. And I know it's not fair, but everything was different after you came." The words hit like a slow-moving truck, too heavy to dodge, too surreal to fully absorb. I wanted to laugh, to scream, to run. I wanted to ask how it was my fault that I arrived during a storm I didn't create. Instead, I just stood there, stunned, and realized that I had spent my entire life trying to earn love that was never freely given, chasing the attention of people who never knew what to do with me. She said more after that. I think she tried to explain, to justify, to rewrite history in real time, but I stopped listening. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood something that had haunted me for years. It wasn't just that they didn't show up for my birthday. It was that, deep down, they never really saw me as someone worth celebrating. I turned to walk away, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I didn't have anything left to give. Not explanations, not grace, not another chance. She called after me once, my name echoing down the alley like a ghost trying to cling to life. but I didn't turn back. Because in that moment, I realized the silence I'd created wasn't revenge, it was peace. And maybe, for the first time in years, I had finally found enough of it to walk away. There's something about being told you were never part of the plan that alters the very architecture of your identity, not in some theatrical, dramatic way like the plot twist of a soap opera, but in a slow, irreversible reorganization of everything you believed about why you were loved, where you stood, and what your place was in the universe that raised you. I left my mother standing in that alley with the kind of ache that doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in like damp air, filling every inch of space until even your bones feel soaked in disappointment. I drove home with both hands on the wheel, eyes forward, but my mind was unraveling thread after thread of a life I thought I understood, tugging at old memories to see which ones would hold together and which would fall apart now that I knew the truth. That night, I didn't cry. I couldn't. My face felt like it belonged to someone else, stiff and unfamiliar, like I had been wearing the wrong skin for too long and was only just realizing it didn't fit. I made tea I didn't drink and sat on the couch, the television on low volume just to fill the room with something other than the echo of my thoughts. And then, around midnight, as if summoned by some cosmic cruelty, I got a notification. Amanda had posted another set of photos from Bear's birthday party. There she was, dressed like she was attending a gala, smiling with her arms around Mom and Dad, all three of them looking like they belonged to each other in a way I had never quite managed to. One of the captions read, "Bear shares a birthday week with his favorite aunt. Double the reason to celebrate." I stared at the screen so long I forgot to blink. Favorite aunt. That's what I was now. Not a sister, not a daughter, a punchline with a family plan, a footnote in my own life. And yet in that moment of numbing disbelief, something surfaced. Something buried deep, older than memory but sharp enough to cut through the noise. A moment, a fragment. I must have been 5, maybe 6. I remembered a birthday party, mine supposedly, but it had Amanda's name on the cake. We were both in dresses, hers newer, mine slightly too small, and I recalled blowing out candles on a cake shaped like a unicorn while my parents clapped and took pictures of Amanda holding Bear, their golden retriever at the time, the original Bear before the one with the Instagram account. At the time, I didn't question it. I was too young to understand that you can't borrow joy from someone else's celebration, that even if they let you blow out the candles, the wish isn't really yours. I pulled out old photo albums that night, ones I hadn't looked at in years, and as I flipped through the pages, I noticed something that had always been there but had never spoken quite so loudly. Amanda had a party every year, same week, same smiles, same cake. And mine? Mine was always folded in around hers, an afterthought dressed up as convenience. There were captions written by my mother. Amanda's big day, celebrating our shining star. And then in smaller print, scrawled like a footnote, also Kara's birthday. It hit me with a sick sort of clarity. My birthday hadn't just been forgotten this year. It had never really been mine at all. The following morning, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't call ahead. I didn't bring anything but my own resolve. The house looked the same, painfully familiar, like a relic of a history I was no longer part of. I knocked once, waited, then opened the door with the spare key still hidden under the same cracked flower pot by the porch. Inside, the air smelled like lemon cleaner and dog shampoo. Bear barked from the living room, tail wagging, oblivious to the chaos his party had helped unravel. Amanda was there, naturally, lounging on the couch in matching pajamas with the dog, scrolling through her phone without a care in the world. When she saw me, her face tightened, not with guilt, but with the kind of annoyance reserved for uninvited guests at their own intervention. She said nothing, just raised an eyebrow as if to ask, "What now?" I walked past her into the kitchen, where my dad was nursing a mug of coffee and trying to look like he hadn't been waiting for this exact confrontation. Mom wasn't there, and I didn't ask where she was. It didn't matter. I looked at my father and asked a single question. "Did you know?" He didn't pretend not to understand. He set his mug down with more force than necessary and sighed, like the weight of a secret finally had to be shared. "Your mom always struggled around your birthday," he said slowly, carefully. "Amanda was born a few days before your due date, but you came late. They were supposed to have separate birthdays, but it ended up overlapping. Your mom always said it was easier to just combine things, make it one big day. You never complained. Never complained. As if silence is consent. As if a child, too young to know what she's missing, has any business advocating for herself in a home where love is rationed like coupons." Amanda joined the conversation then, rolling her eyes and groaning like this was some tired soap opera. "Oh my God, Kara, are you seriously still mad about this? It was a birthday. Get over it. You've always made everything about you." The laugh that escaped me wasn't a happy one. It was hollow and tired, the sound of someone who's finally reached the end of the line. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just looked at Amanda and said, "It was never about the birthday. It was about every day you were treated like the sun, while I was told to be grateful for the shade." And then, with no further drama, I walked out. Not because I didn't want to fight, but because I had finally realized the fight was never going to be fair. You can't wrestle for affection with people who've already decided who deserves it more. You can't bleed in front of someone who thinks your pain is an exaggeration. That night, I lit a single candle on a slice of leftover cheesecake I bought for myself from a corner bakery I passed on the way home. I didn't sing, I didn't wish. I just watched it flicker, steady and quiet, and thought maybe it's time I stopped waiting for someone else to make the day matter. Because this year, the dog got balloons. But I got clarity, and in a strange way, that felt like a better gift than anything they could have wrapped. There's a moment, usually right after the dust settles, but long before the consequences have fully crystallized, where the silence starts to sound different, not peaceful, not vindictive, but hollow. Like the absence of a once familiar hum you only now realize was the sound of your own tolerance humming just beneath the surface, masking the constant static of disappointment. In the days following my walkout from my parents' house, I waited for something, an apology, a deeper reckoning, a moment of vulnerability that could at least serve as a bandage over years of emotional splinters. But none came. There was no voicemail left on a borrowed phone, no letter slid under my door, no awkward attempt to meet in the middle. What I got instead was exactly what I had always received: silence, now repackaged as retaliation. They didn't understand that I hadn't walked away because I wanted them to chase me, to fall to their knees and beg for forgiveness. I walked away because I finally understood they never would. I'd spent too long confusing proximity with love, mistaking polite tolerance for emotional investment, believing that if I just stayed patient, if I just kept showing up, they'd one day see me, not just notice me in the background of Amanda's milestones, but really see me, whole and flawed and worthy in my own right. But now at 34, standing in the middle of my life with more questions than family photos, I understood that some people build their definitions of love around consistency and fairness, while others define it by convenience and tradition. And unfortunately, I had been born into the latter. On the third night after everything fell apart, I sat alone in a small diner just off the highway, a place I used to visit in college when I needed to be somewhere that smelled like pancakes and anonymity, the kind of place where the waitresses call you honey and don't ask questions when your eyes are swollen or your phone stays face down for the entire meal. I ordered coffee and a slice of pie, not because I was particularly hungry, but because rituals matter more when everything else is uncertain. And then, without ceremony or intention, I lit a single candle I had tucked into my purse, one of those cheap emergency tea lights from the dollar store, and placed it in the center of the pie. I stared at it for a long time, letting the soft, flickering light cast shadows across the cracked Formica tabletop. And I thought about everything that candle represented. Not celebration, not victory, but survival, endurance. The act of keeping your own flame alive, even when no one else bothers to notice whether you're burning out. I didn't make a wish. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, I wasn't hoping for change or closure or even peace. I was just acknowledging that I was still here, still breathing, still capable of wanting something better than the crumbs I had been handed my whole life. Just as the wax began to pool, my phone vibrated against the table. Not a call, but an email. From Dad. The subject line was blank, which already told me more than the body ever could. I opened it expecting nothing and still managed to be disappointed. It was short, vague, and carefully constructed not to accept blame. We didn't realize how deep this ran. Your mom is upset. Amanda's trying to process everything. Maybe it's time we all had a real conversation. There was no "I'm sorry," no admission of wrongdoing, just the implication that I was now responsible for guiding them through the emotional mess they had spent decades building. I stared at that email for several minutes before hitting delete, not because I didn't want a conversation, not because I was done hoping for something better, but because I finally recognized that the person they wanted to talk to, the daughter who didn't argue, didn't question, didn't make waves, was gone. And the woman who had taken her place didn't owe them anything, least of all the labor of making their guilt more palatable. As I left the diner, the sky was turning that soft indigo shade that always feels like the last deep breath before night takes over completely. I thought about Amanda, about how her world would keep spinning without interruption, her birthday photos still racking up likes, her followers still laughing at Bear's new sweater, completely unaware of the wreckage left in the wake of her effortless entitlement. I thought about Mom, about whether she was still crying or if the moment had already passed, tucked away with other inconvenient emotions she didn't know how to unpack. And I thought about Dad, who had always stood just behind the chaos, quiet and complicit, more loyal to comfort than truth. And then I thought about me, the woman who had canceled the phone plan without a word, the woman who chose stillness over confrontation and clarity over comfort, the woman who didn't want revenge, not really, but needed her absence to be loud enough to finally be heard. I know how this looks to the outside world. I know there are people who will call me ungrateful, dramatic, cold, who will say, but they're still your parents, as if biology is an unbreakable contract that guarantees forgiveness, no matter how many times it's breached. But those people haven't sat through 34 birthdays waiting for someone to show up. They haven't watched a dog get balloons while their own milestones were met with indifference. They haven't had to become their own witnesses when the people who were supposed to love them most couldn't even remember to look. So no, I didn't call them back. I didn't re-add them to the plan. I didn't light the candle for reconciliation. I let it burn out slowly on that diner table, the wax hardening into a strange little monument to the kind of peace that only comes when you stop waiting for people to become who you needed them to be. Maybe one day they'll call, from someone else's phone, from someone else's home, and maybe I'll answer. Maybe I won't. That part of the story hasn't been written yet. But one thing is certain. This time, they'll have to leave a message. And maybe I won't call back.